So I wanted to talk about graffiti mentors and the value of them. Give you some ideas on how, at least, I mean, it was over 30 years ago that I actually, or was it? I don't remember. Somewhere around 30 years ago that I had a mentor when I was coming up. I started writing in 91. I think I got my first mentor in, I don't know, 92, 93, somewhere around there. So it may be different now, but I want to just run you through the experience I had and just kind of tell you what the value is. And then I want to also kind of give some of the new writers some pointers on maybe how you could possibly find a mentor without being pushy or annoying and all that kind of shit. So I got some stuff in here. Let's just jump in. So here's how it worked when it happened with me, and I'll kind of give you the backstory on that. So around 92, 93, I met the guys from AD, and, you know, this is some old shit, but AD was like Gank, Fate, Havoc, Gone, Saber, some other people. I don't know, my brain isn't bringing all the names. But what ended up happening is they ended up moving all of those guys over and formed MSK. It's kind of like a long story. MSK already existed before, and they kind of reformed it. For the sake of this, I'm not going to get into this whole story. So I got really lucky, and I became friends with Gank, who ended up being GK, who we all know is one of the most prolific bombers of all time. But I happened to meet him when we were very young. He was 15. I don't know. I was 18, 19, something like that. And he became my first mentor. So he was a very knowledgeable guy. So he knew about all the local people, and he kind of was able to fill me in on all the crews. And so I really got a crash course in LA and in LA graffiti with him. He's also like a human atlas kind of, you know. So I remember he would always know everywhere to go. I was able to learn a lot from him. We were bombing together and painting together. And so having a mentor, it really fast tracks your graph career. So to put it in perspective, before I met him, I was basically a toy for 2 years. And then after I met him and started getting exposed to all these people, I got put on MSK. I met Eclipse, who also mentored me, not quite as hands-on as GK. I spent a lot of time with GK. So he kind of taught me all the ins and outs, but Eclipse gave me letters and gave me advice on, you know, how to balance letters and how to do simples and the importance of learning simples and all these kind of fundamental things. And I made more progress in maybe like my first 3 months of being around these guys than I did the whole first 2 years of my graph career. So having a mentor is really, and it's the same thing in business. Like, people pay lots of money for mentors. I mean, I pay money every single month to be part of these entrepreneur groups where we get mentored by high-level entrepreneurs so I can learn about business. And in graph, it's no different. I mean, you don't pay. I'm sure there's some people that you can pay to mentor you, and maybe it'd be worth it if it was a really solid person. But generally how it worked is you'd start to, you know, hang out with people. And if they were, you know, generally a couple of years, 3 years ahead of you, something like that. So you're still of a similar age range to where, you know, you want to do the same kind of things. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for like one of you youngsters that's like 18, 19 to have me mentor you, because we're not going to spend a whole lot of time together. That would be weird. Fucking 18-year-old going out and spending every day with a 48-year-old, you know, that just doesn't make whole lot of sense. So you find people in your age range, but they're further along than you. They can really show you the ropes and escalate, or, you know, sort of fast track your learning process. I don't know. I kind of rambled there. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight on the value of having a mentor. I have not really been, like I said, or I don't know if I said it already, but this was like 30 years ago or more that I went through all this. And I know that a lot of other writers from that era had similar experiences. So I don't really know what it's like now. sort of on the ground level. So I can't really say if these kind of things happen anymore in that sort of organic way. But what I do know is that we now have social media, and we have a lot of writers that are maybe not coming into the scene in the same way that we did. So if you think about pre-social media, pre-cell phone, pre-internet, pre-all of that stuff, we basically just started writing, and then you naturally start running into other writers, in yards and train yards, or, you have a similar way of dressing, a similar way of carrying yourself. Again, I don't know if that's really how it is now. When I look at people, I can't really tell if they're writers or not, but back in the 90s, you kind of got an idea when you looked at somebody, you're like, oh, that dude writes, just by the way they dressed, the way they carried themselves. That stuff probably exists now, but I'm just not as observant of it. So I don't know if that stuff is still happening. I'm assuming that it is. So you have that. But you can also use social media in order to start forming these relationships. So what I would say, the first thing, all of this stuff that I'm going to say, the first thing that you have to do, in my opinion, and how I would do it, if I had the knowledge that I have now, and I was back 30 years ago, and let me rephrase that. If I had the knowledge that I have now as a young writer, this is what I would do, or if I was giving myself advice. I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place right now. The first thing that I think is the most important thing is anything I'm going to say here, you have to get yourself on the mindset to where you will do all of this stuff with zero expectations from other people. So we kind of live in this world where people feel entitled to shit. And the reality is we're not entitled to anything. So I think you should get to the mindset where you're happy to provide. I hate this term. It probably doesn't get used a lot in graph, but I follow a lot of entrepreneurs and shit, and they say add value. It's this thing, it's really cringy, but I can't think of another way to say it. So I'm just going to use it here. The way I see it is you need to get yourself to the point where you're comfortable adding value to other people without expecting anything from them. And so what I would do on social media, and I've covered this on a past episode about graffiti and the internet, but I want to really focus on mentorship and how to find a mentor, or at least start to get relationships going with people. So number one, I would say never ask anybody for shit. So even if you do want a mentor and you're doing all of this work to seek out a mentor, I would just not ask them for anything. It would just try to let it organically happen. So the way it happened with me, I did not ask GK for pointers. I didn't ask him for anything. We just sort of became friends, and he knew that he had knowledge that I needed, and he started just providing that knowledge to me, and I did not ask him for anything. So if you go out and start asking all these people, hey, will you be my mentor? Will you be my mentor? Maybe you'll find one, but I don't think that's the right way to go. So just to button that up, just go into all of these things that I'm going to say without any expectation of anything in return. Just give the value, and if something happens, cool. If nothing happens, that's cool too. So what I would do is find people in my local area. And again, I talked about this on another episode. There's lots of ways you can do that. You can do hashtags of, Las Vegas graffiti or St. Louis graffiti or wherever you're from. You may start to be able to start getting some information that way. Obviously, if you're going out and writing, you're going to meet people, but I'm not really out there on the street anymore. So I don't really know how all that works. It's probably the same. So you're probably going to meet some people that way too. So I would exchange social media with them if you do meet people. And so when you find people that you're interested in maybe forming a relationship with, start by liking and commenting on their posts as you see them. Don't try to get all crazy and like 500 of their posts and comment on all their shit. Like, just do it organically, and try to just, by doing that, you're helping boost their post. So you're you're getting in front of them and you're providing this value. I'm going to say the word value a bunch. It's annoying, but it's the word I can think of. So you're providing this value for them without any expectations, from anything. But the idea is that you want to become somebody that's giving. If you become one of those people, then people are naturally going to want to do things for you too. That's like the tricky thing is like, you got to get to that mindset first, because you don't want to do this stuff with the expectation of getting something, because that humans are capable of sniffing that stuff out. So if you're going and doing all of these things, hoping to get something in return, most people are going to pick up on that and they're not going to like it. So it's going to take some work to get to the point. If you're not the kind of person that naturally does that, life's going to be better for you anyway if you get to the point where you're willing to do things without any expectation of anything in return. And it's the same thing in business, same thing in any aspect of life. If you're willing to give without any expectations, you're just naturally going to get shit back anyway. So it has to be genuine. So other things you could do is you could share their work. You could support projects they have. So if they have like a show coming up, you could help them promote. You can put it out on your social and maybe ask your friends to promote it. All these kind of different things. You could even support their crewmates. Like if you learn that they're from this crew, maybe you could follow some of their people too and support them as well, and just get in the habit of being very supportive and doing all of this kind of thing. Then eventually, you may be able to start DMing them. I wouldn't just jump right in and start DMing them and asking them shit or any of that kind of stuff. What I would do is I would kind of read the whole exchange. So if you're constantly adding this value to them and sharing their stuff and all this kind of shit, and they never reply to you, it's possible that if you DM them, you won't get a reply. I'm not saying not to, but it's possible. If you've established some kind of rapport with them, like in the comments section, if they're consistently replying to your comments, maybe you have a good enough rapport to where if you sent them a DM, they would respond if they seem at all receptive. So that's something that I would do, but I would still just try to provide value. I would just try to still keep. I'm having a little hard time explaining, and I hope this makes sense. Like the idea, since you're using social media, you don't have the benefit of that one-on-one interaction, like how it sort of unfolded for me. So I'm trying to just get I've never done it this way, and this is what I would do if I needed a mentor right now, So if you do DM them and they do respond, maybe you could kind of build from there. I wouldn't just DM them and say, hey, let's paint sometime. I mean, maybe it'll work. I don't know. I personally just wouldn't do that. Just keep providing the value and just kind of see where things go from there. And then maybe you can invite them to paint. Maybe you can find a wall or something like that. If you do find a mentor, and this is another mindset that I think you need to get into early on, is the thing about it is if you're going to get a bunch of information from them, there has to be a value exchange, So you may be thinking, hey, man, I'm just like, I'm new and I don't really, I don't have any techniques and I don't have any of this or that or anything that I can provide for them. It's like, it shouldn't be a one-sided thing. It has to be a value exchange. So there's all kinds of different things you can do. Obviously, the stuff that I said before, that's you're providing something on your end by liking their shit, commenting on their shit, sharing their stuff, supporting their projects, doing all this kind of stuff. But if you do end up having somebody taking you under their wing and they are giving you all of this knowledge, you need to make sure that you're giving something back, or at least offering to provide something for them as well. And like I was saying, if you don't think that you have anything, there's lots of things that if you get creative, like you could be as simple as like offering to show up to their spot and buff the wall for them, or, help them fill in their piece. Or maybe you could get really good at doing backgrounds, and maybe they're a letter person and you're trying to learn all this kind of stuff. you could get good at doing backgrounds and be like, hey, I'll do a cool cityscape and behind your piece or something like that. Or if you have some skills with characters, you could do characters next to their piece. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. I mean, for me and GK, I was a toy and he was up and coming, pretty, he was not the GK that you know now, obviously. I mean, he was up and coming, but he was much further along than I was. But the value exchange was he didn't drive and I did. So everywhere we went, I drove. We went bombing all the time. I was his transportation. So there was he got to be able to go and paint all these places and have transportation. That was part of the value exchange. There was some other things too. I mean, I helped him, go around and get resumes for a job and doing things like that. So there was a value exchange there. And so you need to try to be creative and make sure you're giving something back. And then if you do happen to have a mentor, I would say just be really mindful to not waste their time. So if they do provide you all of this knowledge, make sure you're applying that knowledge, because it would be frustrating if you did mentor somebody and they didn't take any of your advice. If they're teaching you things, just make sure you're applying that stuff. And if they see you growing with the knowledge that they're giving you, they're going to probably want to give you more of that knowledge and see you grow. I mean, that's going to be rewarding for them to see that, like if they care. And if they're mentoring you, obviously they do. So be sure to not waste their time once you do get into some kind of mentorship type of scenario. Along the lines of not wasting their time, make sure you think these questions through. Like if you do want to ask them questions, don't waste their time. Like come up with a very specific question. Like I get this question all the time, like, hey, I'm getting into graph. You got any pointers? That's really a time wasting question, because you could have just simply asked like, hey, what's the best marker for this kind of surface? Or can you tell me the difference between high pressure and low pressure paint? Or I don't know, these kind of whatever questions, but there's always a specific question. And when I get that, hey, any pointers, it's like, I have no idea what to say. So there has to be more like, well, what are you looking, do you paint? Do you just draw in sketchbooks? Are you a bomber? Do you looking for piece information? Like, what are you looking for? So make sure you're not wasting their time with like these really vague questions, and just make sure that you think things through before you start asking. So on the other end of it, I think there's a lot of, it's important for older writers, and not even older writers like as old as me, older, but like just anybody that's established, just, instead of, there's a certain level of like, we all went through it when we were toys. The people that were a few years ahead of us, there's some, I don't want to call it hazing, because it's not quite it, but what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe it is hazing. I don't know. Hazing seems so deliberate, but like I remember coming up and getting, sort of clowned and not really pushed around, but God, I'm kind of blanking on what I'm trying to say, but like they didn't really make it easy, but at the same time, there was a lot of value in that. Like, for them, they're seeing like, if you're really all about this, like if you can handle, somebody, God, I'm trying to think of some examples, but I remember, like people from affiliated crews, like just capping over my pieces and stuff, and, just kind of clowning on you and talking shit and doing all these kind of things. I don't know if it was intentional, but if you make it through and you get to the other side of that stuff, you're going to be a little bit stronger. You're going to have a little more mental toughness. And for them, they'll see that you can handle it. They'll see that you're really about it. And I think there's part of it, maybe even it's a subconscious thing, like, we're not going to make this easy on this guy coming up, but, if he sticks with it and he doesn't just like fall off after 6 months or something like that, then we know he's at least somebody that we'd want to be around. And I think this is pretty normal. At least it was in the 90s. I'm assuming it is now. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I kind of got way off track. I just wanted to say, like, for the writers that are established, I would hope that some of you guys are receptive to the people that are a couple of years behind you to kick them down some of this knowledge. And then the older writers to kick down some of the old school knowledge to some of the sort of newer guys, and the guys and girls in I don't know, to me, 10 years and less seems newer to me, but that's probably because I'm old, so I don't know what's considered new, but like, you're pretty well established after 5 years or so. So, if you got like a 25-year, 30-year veteran or something meeting a writer that's like 5 years in, there's some information that you can pass down to them and they can pass that down to the younger people. So for all of us old motherfuckers, let's be a little more receptive to some of these up and comers and kick down some of this information without being a dick and like talking shit and these kids don't know and all this kind of stuff. Like just kick them down the knowledge and hope that they receive it. All right.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.